Infinite banking is a life insurance policy. It's not a policy. It's not about the numbers. It is a thought process around how to utilize money. It is about the banking function in your life. It is not about a life insurance policy. The policy is the tool to help us get where we need to go.
Mary Jo, thank you for joining us. And we want to just start off by hearing your story about discovering the infinite banking concept.
I'm going to go way back because to the absolute very beginning, because I think it's interesting for some people to hear. I was working as a PNC agent selling, home and auto insurance. And the daycare lady, the lady that took care of my child, said, "Hey, do you want to, work at this life insurance company?" And I was like, "No, I'm not even licensed for life insurance. I don't like life insurance." No. I'm like, "But what are they paying?" And so I went, and then these people tried to explain it to me, but I did not know what it was. I thought, well, are they Forex trading? Like, what are they doing? Because for an hour, he was drawing stuff on the chalkboard, and I did not know what any of it meant. I went home, I read the book, and then I read, 5 other books because I thought for sure these people were going to prison. Because why would this be right? There is no possible way. And let's keep in mind, I had just got scammed in a Forex trading deal. So I was like, I was on high alert. So I did my due diligence, and then I came back, met again, and left the office calling people like, "Have you heard of this? This is amazing. Oh my gosh." I didn't even get down their hallway, and I was already on the phone with people. And then, it took me about 2 weeks to decide that I'm just going to quit my job with a whole whopping $10,000 in my IRA. And we're just going to start there because everybody's going to love this. And that was not the case, but I didn't quit. I kept going. So yeah, that's how I heard about it. I just was going to manage an office. I was going to be an office manager. And then when I read Nelson's book and I did my due diligence, I thought, this is crazy. I've been reading books about penny stocks. I've been telling my financial advisor, like, "Hey, is there something different? I don't like this risk." It was, I just lost money in 2009. I found Nelson's book in like August or September of 2010. And then I decided I was going to do this in December of 2010. And I showed up at my first think tank in February of 2011.
Yeah, I remember meeting you the first time.
I know, it was over the poodles.
You were just you were doing a lot of listening and a lot of looking. I remember that,
You were the first time I met you, David, you were taking the poodles out of the car up to the hotel room, and I freaked out over the poodles because we had a poodle. And then I see you in the room, and I thought, "Oh, the poodle guy is here. This is his event. Oh, what the who knew?"
No, well, I didn't bring the poodles. My wife did. Okay.
I just remember Nelson was standing at the door when I came downstairs, and I introduced myself, and he said, "Oh, you're a Spitfire." I just introduced myself. And so, but it was great because I was there to learn as much as I possibly could and meet people. And it was game changer. If you don't go to the think tank, you're absolutely crazy. If you're a practitioner listening to this and you're not going to the think tank, you're crazy because it is a game changer being in a room with all of those like-minded people. And I've only missed one since 2010.
Yeah. No, it's a great event for sure.
Oh gosh,
And
I missed every anniversary for like 7 years.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. That's totally fine. We're not like big anniversary people anyway. But I was like, I am sorry. I am not gonna stay home for my anniversary. That can be celebrated another time. Think tank happens once a year. It's just there's always the speakers are good, but the people are just the friends I've made, the people I can count on outside of that is huge. Absolutely huge. So, yeah, I loved it.
Well, speaking of Nelson, everyone seems to have their Nelson stories, and he loved to tell jokes. Do you have any memory of Nelson that sticks out to you in your mind, or that you think about often that makes you laugh, or that you want to
I
share?
have a couple. So they both happened when I brought him to Bismarck to speak. One, I picked him up from the airport and we were driving along, and he said, if you're showing illustrations, you're doing it wrong. And I thought, oh my God, I show illustrations to everybody. I am not telling him because he's yelling at me, So it's like, I am not telling him. Or he'll, you'd ask him a question. He's like, well, think about it, Mary Jo. Like, so finally one day I said, Nelson, and this was when he was here too. And we had him at our house for dinner. And I said, Nelson, have you always been like this? Like, because I don't know what to think about. So if you don't tell me, I am not that person that is just this in-depth thinker like him. He's like, yep, I've been like this my whole life. And I thought, well, I'm not, honey. So can you tell me more? Yeah. I got the very first time I ever asked him a question, I was at a conference and he yelled at me and I was like, whoa, okay. And it wasn't yelling, right? Like Nelson didn't yell, it was passion. Like I call it German passion because I'm German, but I don't know what nationality he was.
He was ashamed of his nationality.
Really?
English. He said that one day he picked up he went online to a London phone book, and there was like 20 pages of Nash's in London, and he was really mad because he was a historian along with being the Austrian economist, all of them as a layperson, and he was not fond of the British Empire building, okay, and all the history of all that stuff, and so he wanted to distance himself from his British heritage, quote unquote. Oh. So there you go.
He's a passionate Brit.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he never, he was just so convicted about, and I was listening to a podcast this morning and they were talking about that. Like when you are convicted with something, nobody can tell you otherwise. Like it to be true, and it is true. And he was so convicted about everything that he taught us that it didn't come across soft. And he had been asked the same question, I'm sure 10,000 times. If I have a client that asks me the same question 10,000 times, I get a little bit passionate as well.
Mary Jo, when you first started working and implementing the infinite banking concept, tell us about that. What were some of the challenges that you encountered in those early days? And then, how did you overcome those challenges?
As an agent?
Yes.
The challenges it's hard. It is so hard when you first start. And so it's like just the one thing that I always tell people is, I got yelled at by friends. Don't tell me what to do with my money. I got, people would say, oh my gosh, all you do is work. Now, I lost friends through that process because all I did was work. But it is such a different thought process, as you guys know, that people can't, the noise, as Nelson said, the noise is so great that trying to get people to see and care, because people don't care about their money. Okay. They would rather talk about their sex life with a complete stranger than their money with someone that they know can help. We have such a horrible mindset, such a horrible focus on what is important that it's hard. And so it's just this road of having meetings and having, you'll just do it feels like you'll do anything to get somebody to listen. And so it was 5 years of hell, really. Like I was starving. I couldn't, I always tell people like and I'm sure you've heard my story before, but maybe some others haven't. I was cleaning the bathtub and I bleached my sweatpants, which I do not ever leave my house in. But I was crying about ruining my sweatpants that nobody ever sees. But I didn't have money to buy more sweatpants because I had all my credit cards are maxed. I'm trying to make this business work because remember, I quit with $10,000 and 2 weeks. Like, don't do that. Like, let's be smarter than Mary Jo there. Let's not do that. But finding you have to learn how to market. You have to learn how to talk about it. You have to learn how to talk to people. You have to learn the product. Like there's so much to learn. And if you don't have the right mentor and the right coach, that just makes it that much harder. And I did not have the right mentor and the right coach. And so I was having to learn marketing. I was having to build my own website. I was having to do everything from scratch on my own. And it was just a lot. And so you just bear with it, thinking that at some point this is going to turn around. And the people that I was targeting, which are farmers, didn't want to listen. So then I had to write the book because I'm going to meet Henri with Henri. And if they don't want to listen to me, then I'm going to make them read the book. And I wish I would. That is one thing that I wish I would have done right away, is made them read Nelson's book and not give them a refund, make them pay for the book. Don't refund their money for the book. Like, make them read the book. And if someone complains about having to buy a book, move on. They are not your person. Just don't care. Don't even question why they don't want it. Who cares? They don't want it. Just find somebody that does, because it's just a law of numbers. How many people can we talk to before someone's going to talk to us and someone's going to care? And then if they do care, Aunt Susie and Uncle Johnny are going to say, oh, life is bad. And they're not understanding the concept. And if that person's going to believe Uncle Johnny and Aunt Susie, they're also not your person. So it's just all of those things I had to kind of learn the hard way. And everybody does, because we don't believe the people that come before us that tell us all that stuff. Because people told me that. I remember people told me, you sell the book, you keep talking to people. And so, but it was hard. You just keep talking, keep spreading the word. I don't care how it's done. You keep spreading the word. There's not a right or a wrong way to do it.
Well, and now you are spreading the word. You have a couple podcasts, and you have how many books now?
Well, I suppose you could say 3 now. Look at me go.
Yes.
3 books that accompany Nelson's.
Right.
Not 3 books that Mary Jo wrote because of IBC. They're accompanying to BYOB. And so it's not, everybody's out there thinking they should write a book. But I didn't rewrite Nelson's book. It's a book to go with his book. So it's not like you can't read my book and get all the information you need. You need to still read BYOB.
Yeah, I heard you say you wrote the book because nobody would listen to you. I don't think I've heard that before.
No. So I had all the numbers, right? Never show them the numbers. That's what Nelson said. So I would go to farm shows, and I had all, like, in my book, I have case studies. I'd have the case studies all printed out because I didn't have a book at the time. I just had the case study. So I'd have that all printed out. And then farmers would tell me I didn't look like a farmer, which apparently I don't know. I didn't know I was supposed to wear cow to the farm show. Like, I didn't know that that's what I needed to look like. Bibs. I didn't know that's what I was supposed to look like. So I didn't look like a farmer. And they were already farming without the bank. Commodity prices were good. And I didn't understand farming. I didn't understand. Well, here's the problem. They didn't understand the mindset of IBC. The first half of Nelson's book, I wasn't talking about that. So they were just looking at numbers saying, I don't need it. And then if I did give them Nelson's book, let's be honest, I live in the North and he's got Bible verses in there. You don't do that stuff in the North. And so they're like, oh, he's just this Bible pusher, huh? And so then they wouldn't want to read the book because there's a Bible verse in the book. And they just couldn't, like, get their head around it, because this isn't for farming. This is for people that don't farm. So I thought, well, fine. Then I'm writing the book, and I'm going to change your mindset in the first half of my book. And then I'll show you some numbers in the second half, like Nelson does. Right. And so the first half, I addressed all their problems in their mindset. And then the people that do want to change the mindset, and they do have that challenge, they're like, oh, maybe she does know something about farming. No, I mean, people still tell me that today, David. I'll meet with somebody. I probably hear that 2 or 3 times a year. Oh, you know, I'm talking about calving and cows and pears and whatever. And it's usually like some rancher. And they'll be like, "Oh, you do know something about farming, huh?"
Well, you're
I
born and
guess a
raised.
little.
Yeah, you didn't just drop in from New York City, man. You've been there your whole life, right?
But I don't look like a farmer. I need to go get my bibs. I should have worn my bibs for this interview.
Yeah. Well, going back to your book, you said the outline of the book. You talk about the problem and the mindset, and then you get into the numbers. Well, that sounds like that was Nelson's approach also, because he kept saying if you don't understand the problem, then you can talk about the solution until you're blue in the face, but it's not a solution if it doesn't contrast the problem, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And they don't, but they would read Nelson's book, and his book is very much stories, right? It's a lot of analogies.
Yeah.
And if you think like me, the analogies don't make sense. Like, why do I care about headwinds and tailwinds? I really don't care how a plane works. Does not matter to me how a plane works. And
Well, it's they're parables.
We're
Is what
simple
they are.
people, David. So my little simple pea brain is like, I don't get it. I got it, but I didn't get it.
Yeah.
Right. And so there were pieces of his book that made sense to me, and I was hooked. I was done. I knew it was legit, but there were other pieces that did not make sense to me. And so I knew if it didn't make sense to me, it's not going to make sense to some farmer, and it's not going to make sense to somebody else. So I just dumbed down his stuff. And I didn't dumb it all down. You can't find anything about the mech in my book. That's not in my book. You need to go to Nelson's book. I didn't rewrite it verbatim. Nelson saw it. Nelson approved it. I did not. There is no point in me rewriting his book. I just made it simpler. I didn't add extra interest in my illustrations. I didn't do any of that stuff. I just made it very, very simple so that you could get into the right mindset and then go read Nelson's book. If you don't understand Nelson's book, then read my book first and then go read Nelson's book. I read Dwayne Burnell's book after I read Nelson's book, and I thought, well, why didn't Nelson just say that? And then I read Nelson's book again, and I'm like, oh, he did say that. He didn't say it the same way.
I'm so confused.
You guys, I'm not that smart.
It's really, it's great. It's just natural for somebody to open up a book and gravitate towards the pictures and the illustrations and not do all the legwork and try to read what it's all about. So no, I get it. I get it. Yes, it's obvious, but Nelson was a farmer. You know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
A tree farmer.
Yes.
He used to call himself a forester, but he was a tree farmer.
Yeah.
But
he was. But most people don't. Even though he was a forester, that only resonates with people that have trees. we don't have trees up here, and so.
No, your dad does though, right?
Yeah, my dad has all kinds of trees, but we don't cut them down and manage them to regrow them. We are like, what do you mean you cut a tree down? That's a sin. So it's still this mindset that certain industries think that they're very special, and they're not special. Farmers are not any different than a blue collar business than any other business, but they think they are. And so if you put that name on the title of the book, now all of a sudden, oh, that's for me. But it is for everybody. It's becoming your own banker is for everybody. The most important business in the world is banking. But we don't think like that. And so it's just it's not when I had to write the book to get them to understand. And so back to Lee's original question. Yes, we have Life Without the Bank, which is written for non-farmers, Farming Without the Bank for the US, and now we've written Farming Without the Bank Canada, co-authored with Winnie. So, yeah, it's because the Canadians are having the same problems, right? I could write that book for South Africa, for Australia. I've sold books to South Africa, Australia, Canada, because they're all having the same problem. Money is a world problem, not a US problem, and a Canada problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder why.
Mm-hmm.
Central Bank.
That's another funny story of Nelson. So I emailed him and I was like, oh, Nelson, have you ever heard of the book Vitamin B17, The Cancer Cure? It was written by Edward Griffin, the same guy that wrote
The Creature from Jekyll
Island. Oh, no, I was on the phone with him and I told him that. And he's like, I sure have, Mary Jo. did you know who created all the cancer treatment stuff? And I was like, well, I've done a lot of cancer research. And so, yeah, the Rockefellers. And he's like, yeah, but it all goes back to the central banks. And I thought, what? And then he sent me some YouTube videos. And I thought, oh my God, Nelson knows all this stuff too? Because it wasn't just, right? Because at that point, I was like, no, Nelson just knows about banking and money and the Federal Reserve and fractional reserve banking and all that stuff. He not paying attention to the health side of it, but the same guy is exposing the same stuff.
He was an avid reader, man. So he was always reading, and he thought that history and economics were joined at the hip. So yeah, you have to understand. Follow the Money Trail was another one of his comments, and all these historical episodes. There's all money is always the issue. It's always what predicates whatever's going on in history. So
it predicates a lot of, I mean, like even in the farming world, we talk about the fact that, you know, farmers by far is the highest rate of suicide amongst any industry. And why do we have such high suicide rates? Because we don't leave the farms with a secession plan. We don't have money to take over. And so now it's a money issue. It almost always is going to come back to a money issue. Well, that kid lost the farm, so he feels like, oh, 8 generations is on my shoulder, so I'm going to commit suicide. Why is he committing suicide? Because he doesn't have the money to keep it going. Why doesn't he have the money to keep it going? Because we didn't do any estate planning. You know, it all flows, the basis of everything, divorce amongst people, like bankruptcy, it's all money, right? And for whatever reason, I heard something yesterday that said bankruptcy, the number one cause for bankruptcy is medical bills. And so even if we look at suicide rates, what is the, just in general, does it come back to money? Does divorce come back to money? But again, we'd rather talk about our sex life with a complete stranger than talk about money and make our life better. It's really sad when you think about it.
Yeah. The story you told in September about that client interview and how much information flowed out of that couple just based upon you trying to get to know them and find out where they were. You learn things that the husband didn't know from the wife, and vice versa and whatnot.
People will tell me all the time, oh, Mary Jo, this is embarrassing. I'm like, there's family drama. I'm gonna find the dirt. I need to find the dirt. And not that I want to be in your family drama and it makes me feel warm and cozy, but how does that help save the farm? How does that keep us from all this debt? What is happening? Who is the vulture that we need to be protecting ourselves against? Because every family has a vulture. I've come across in 14 years of working with farmers and business owners, I've come across five families that did not fight after mom and dad died. And why didn't they fight? Because every one of them knew what the plan was before mom and dad died. There was an estate plan and it was verbally talked about. Everybody knew, but there's a vulture. We need to know. So I'm going to get it out. I'm going to ask enough questions. I'll find it. And sometimes they're not going to just come out and say it, right? But they'll maybe just answer that question about that sister-in-law just a little bit differently than we talked about the rest of the family. And I'm like, whoa, what's happening with her? Do we like her? You know, whoever that is. And they'll be like, oh, they're kind of the problem. And then, you know, the brother is going to say, oh yeah, it's okay. And then the wife is going to be like, oh no, it's not okay. But if we're going to help our clients, we need to know that stuff. In my opinion, we need to know that stuff because we're creating a bank, but we are also providing a death benefit. And what is that death benefit for? Is it for generational wealth? Is it to buy out a business? What is that death benefit for?
Well, that's one of the things I really, I appreciate hearing how you approach your client meetings and all of the questions that you ask and how you really get to know your clients and their stories. And, you talk about celebrating marriages and babies and, being with them if they have a family member pass away. So you really get to know these people on a personal level. Can you share with us maybe an example or a story of how the infinite banking concept changed, your clients' lives?
Here's a good story. So I have a young gal well, she was really young at the time. They were buying their first place. They went to the bank. The bank said, "Oh, well, all of a sudden we're not going to give you a loan. We're 2 weeks away from closing. We're not going to get this first farm that we want to buy." Right? She calls me crying, and I'm like, and she's like, "This is why everybody needs to do this. This is why, because they are going to stop us because I have a Schedule F on my tax return." Like, they didn't care that I was a farmer before. Now all of a sudden it's a big deal. And I just happened to talk to her last week, and she's like, "Marie Jo, it's just crazy. Like, it's just crazy the amount of help that and how it's changed our life, because I came to you crying. Like, one day I'm crying, and now we have a farm, and we're making all this money, and we have a business, and we have the freedom to do all of these things. I can't do everything through their policy yet, but it wasn't just the policy, right? It was the encouragement, the business advice I gave them, all the other things, because as an agent, we're not just a life insurance agent. We should be helping them with business stuff. I'm not an accountant, but I know enough to be dangerous. So here's some information. Take this to your accountant. Here's some information on LLCs. Take this to your attorney, right? Here's some buy sell options. Here's some contract for deed options. Like, where I'm watching them grow, and that's exciting. At what point are they outside of the banking system? What is success to them? To her, it was just having somebody there to encourage her, because let's be honest, most of our parents don't, right? If you have a Gen X or a boomer parent, they're probably not the most encouraging people on the planet. We were raised in a very different environment. You punch a clock, you go to work, you don't have all these big dreams and aspirations. That's stupid. That doesn't happen to everybody. Nobody can do that. And in today's world, it's very different. And I think it's awesome. And I love millennials and Gen Z. They're my absolute favorite, because I am full of ideas and they can take them, and they're full of energy, you know? And so if I can help them in that manner, that's awesome too. So I wish I could say, "Oh, I've got 15 stories," but they don't call me. Really. Like, I love them and I can see their progress, but they don't go, "Oh, the policy allowed me to do X, Y, and Z." They're so busy working. They're like, "Why are you calling? Just leave me alone."
Every time I hear a story like that, I think of one thing, and that is, helping people. As long as I understand, that this really is something to help them. It's not necessarily just someplace to hide their money for years and years and years and years and years. It's actually a usable asset.
Mhm. And we have to teach the life insurance companies that, right? Before I was on with you guys, I was on with a new life insurance company I'm writing with. And they're like, "Well, you can't do that." I'm like, "Why?" I said, "Do you understand how farming works?" And they don't understand. Like, most agents will say, "You need death benefit, Lee. So if you die, your husband has this death benefit to pay for expenses," right? That is not what the death benefit is for. We're creating generational wealth. We're making sure we're saving families and farms, and we're keeping peace within the family so nobody hates each other. Like, and all while we're going to do that, we can use it to buy chemical and fertilizer and cows and apartment buildings and whatever it is you want to, short-term rentals, whatever it is you want to buy with it. But it's a whole picture. It's not just, "Oh, how can this life insurance policy make me rich?" Well, first of all, it's the slowest get rich quick scheme you'll ever come across in your life, you know? And so but in order for us to teach people how to use the policy, we have to teach them what cash flow is. We have to teach them how to run a business. We have to get their mindset right. Like, because Gen X and boomers, We were not taught about cash flow. We were not taught that is just, we could read Robert Kiyosaki's book and go, yeah, how's that going to work? Because we didn't have the internet. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have any of that stuff. And so today's world, it's very different. We can teach the younger people cash flow and get their mindset right away. That's why young kids are so awesome, because they haven't been brainwashed for 40, 50, 60 years. The hardest clients are the old ones with money, because they think they should go to the stock market. They think they should pay cash for everything,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely
young
cash
people
for everything.
young people are so much more open-minded because they haven't been slighted by the world yet.
So that leads me to, maybe I shouldn't talk about this, but what's your succession plan for yourself?
Well, we're working on it right at the
Sure.
moment, David.
Good. Because
So,
I know you got
you
some
mean
young
for
people.
my business?
Yeah.
So this is what I've learned. I have to do my personal stuff before I can do my business stuff. I was like, well, that's not how that works in my head. So I have to do all my personal stuff, but yeah, on the business side, I'm building a team of agents. I'm building a community of agents. And so ideally, those agents will help take over. Jess and Tiara are instructed to stay. I actually have some death benefit on one of my policies that goes directly to Jess, my assistant, so that she can continue to pay for herself and she can make sure Tiara's there and they'll be good, But the book doesn't stop. There's the thing is, who sells the book? What does that look like? Like getting all those right people in place. My marketing guys and I just talked about that. I'm like, you guys are going to have to tell these people how to market, because marketing is like its own little animal, and you either love it or you hate it, kind of. It's not like a in between. And so if you don't understand how to do it, the book stalls. But ideally it goes on forever, like Nelson's.
I know Lee's writing something down over there. That's good.
Yeah, it just like with Nelson's when he handed it to you, right? It's a big animal to kind of figure out, what are we going to do? What do we do with all of our clients? Who manages them?
Yeah.
I've got to introduce them to John and Morgan and Shannon and all the people so that they can, agents out there listening, when you're building your book of business, you need to have a relationship with the insurance company. My clients can call One America at any given time. Everybody within One America is going to know who I trust and who I don't trust and where that business should go.
The subject of orphaned clients comes up a lot in conversations because they're not taken care of. There's no succession plan for these different independent shops,
Like, and here's why we have orphan policies. I have quite a number of them that I service for free, because you don't get paid on those policies. You service those people for free. You do the right thing because they need help from somebody. But orphan policies come because people think that this is easy and they're just going to go write insurance, and then they're going to get all their family and friends involved, and then they're going to realize that it's hard and they don't want to stick it out for 5 to 6 years before they can actually start making some money and creating a living off of it. So they quit. Well, now all your friends and family have no place to go. And so it makes a bad name for infinite banking, makes a bad name for insurance. And it just looks bad in general because they don't have the help. They have to now develop a relationship with somebody that they didn't know. And so this is one of the big reasons I tell people, if you're going to join this business, you better be committed and you better be ready to starve and do the work until you're not going to starve. Because otherwise you're just bringing people in and then you leave them. Be committed and know it's not easy. I remember when I started, they're like, oh, they're telling me all this awesome stuff. And I said, I finally pulled because it was like a team of people that I started with. And I pulled one of them aside and said, how much smoke you blowing up my skirt? Because I'm not buying it's that easy. And I thought it was easier than what I thought it was still. I didn't think it was easy as what he was saying, but I still thought it was going to be easier than what it actually was. People people weren't open to it. Now it's a little bit different because they have the internet and they can see all this stuff and they can talk to people, but it's still hard. Now you're going to leave people with as an orphan, and the insurance companies don't handle those well. Right? They don't give them out to the people they need to be given out to. Half the time they don't give them to anybody. They just don't care.
So, Mary Jo, there's a lot of noise and a lot of misconceptions out there about what the infinite banking concept is. And you've talked about the internet, you've talked about social media and that sort of thing. That's where you're finding a lot of this. Can you address some of those misconceptions and, that you hear out there or that clients maybe bring to you, and how do you handle those?
Here's the biggest one, is that infinite banking is a life insurance policy. It's not a policy. It's not about the numbers. It is a thought process around how to utilize money. It is about the banking function in your life. It is not about a life insurance policy. The policy is the tool to help us get where we need to go. So when we have this huge push and all this noise of, a policy. But even at that, let's just say infinite banking was a policy. For the love of Pete, it is not a universal life policy. Holy cow. It is a whole life, dividend paying whole life. Like, if people could just even get that part right, at least we'd be at halfway there to a win. People want the sexiness of the numbers, and they want these rates of return, because it's not about a rate of return. And for the love of Pete, it's not. If Nelson says it's not about a rate of return, if you are hearing somebody say something other than that, if you are an agent listening to this and you are talking about rates of return, if you are even addressing a rate of return, you're the problem. You're part of the problem. If you're showing illustrations before you even develop a relationship, somebody sends you an email and says, I'd like to buy a policy for $100,000. Can you send me an illustration? And if you send the illustration, you're part of the problem. Because we have to get them to understand the problem so that they understand the solution. I had a guy the other day that said, we went over all of his stuff. We were talking about cash flow, what he wants to do in the future. He was annoyed as all get out with me. And he finally said, so I just want to know how to use this. And then I went over, I kept doing my stuff. I said, we're going to get there, but I have to know all this stuff first. And then we get to, I go through how the policy is structured. I reinforce how loans work and interest and all that stuff. And then he said, I get all this. I've watched all your stuff. I said, then what do you need me for if you know it all? Right? Because he's expecting just numbers. And I could have said, okay, I'm going to make some commission and I'm just going to run some numbers for him. And then I'm going to sell him a policy. And then he's not going to know why he has the policy. The first half of Nelson's book, the first half of my book, is infinite banking. The second half of the book is the tool. When people tell me, I'll say, did you read my book? So I'm like, have you got through the book? And once in a while, a spouse will say, I've only got through the first half. I'm like, good, because that's the most important half anyway. The other stuff we can go over today. Infinite banking, if you read the introduction to BYOB, it will tell you what IBC is not, and it will tell you what it is. He's got it all outlined there. I have it highlighted, and I have it underlined in green and red. What it is not is in red. What it is in green. If you are questioning it, you haven't read the book. Part of the noise is human nature. And so I have found this too. We'll do little clips, and I try to have my marketing people not do some like cliffhanger clip that people don't want to watch the rest of it. Like, we won't do that on IBC, but like, for example, somebody did a clip about how they took one of my clips where I said, you got to beat Parkinson's law. You don't need the mufflers, the exhaust, the lift kits, all the stuff, right? It was a clip from an entire podcast talking about, if you want to buy that stuff, that's fantastic, but use your policy to go buy your lift kit. Oh my God. Human nature is we're not going to listen to more than whatever that clip is. all the rednecks came out in full force, man. In redneck style. And so but where agents are taking clips of this, they're renaming it, they're retitling it, and people are not smart enough, or they're lazy and they don't want to go listen to a full 15-minute podcast. They don't want to have to read a book because they're scared of spines. They'll read a magazine, they'll read Facebook all day long. They'll read a forum online all day long, but they are not going to read something with a spine because that's called a book and I hated them in school. There's a little bit of human nature that's involved in there too. Even if somebody has a really good intent, we need to get those people to understand that they have to read. You should be reading the entire book, and you should be reading it more than once. This is not a one read and you're done type situation.
Well, and I think that we've become kind of like a microwave society as well. Like we want everything instant, and so that's what you're seeing now out there. So
yeah. And so what I'm doing is going, okay, we can do one of two things. We can scream and yell about it, or we can actually provide true content. And when we provide the truth and say, okay, you know what? I saw this video and they're not stating this correctly. This is what is correct. And I will just do the video stating this is what's correct. I had a guy last week, not a farmer. And I said, then he showed me 5 books from other agents that have all written books. And I said, so why me? You don't even farm. Like, you flip real estate. Not that I don't know about that, but that's just not normal to have a conversation like that for me. And he said, because you're the only one telling the truth and you answer a question directly. You have a no BS approach. And so people don't want the wraparound version of that answer. They want the answer, and we have the answers. So if we're the agent, it is our obligation to give them the answer. What are we scared of? That they're going to go to some other agent and we're going to lose business? If they do, they didn't care about their money enough for you to want them as a client anyway. If you're not taking your money that seriously, that you're going to go to John on the street corner because he sells life insurance, then you didn't care. I mean, I get I'm a crazy lady on the internet. I get it. You don't know me. How do you trust me? Remember, I lost money in Forex trading. I understand. But do your due diligence. That bad content can be turned into good as well. Somebody just has to do it, and I can't do it all by myself.
What does the infinite banking concept mean to you?
It's my world, man. It is freedom. It is generational wealth. It is everything. There is nothing that you can't do with it. So why aren't we? Like, it's completely changed our life. It'll change my family's life. It's amazing. And thank God for Nelson. Can you imagine? Like, I wrote a book, right? And I get demolished for this book. But can you imagine writing that book when he did and nothing else like it? Like, yeah, people can read my book and then they go to Nelson's and they could be like, oh yeah, she's, it makes sense because these books are there. I just can't even imagine hauling books around in the back of a car and being brave enough to tell somebody, oh, I wrote this book about whole life insurance and mindset, money mindset. And, I think you should have one. And he had to do it in person. Like, they're beating him up in person.
Hand him a book and say, thanks. He goes, no, that's $20. I was like, what?
Yeah. But it really, like, just general mindset today is very different. You can talk about it. It's normal. People don't think it's woo-woo. What he was talking about was Earl Nightingale stuff. Was stuff that, like, if you listen to Earl Nightingale stuff, you're listening to Nelson. Nelson listened to he had to have listened to all that stuff. And he just put it in conjunction with money. That was not normal conversation back in the day. I mean, we're all here because of him.
Well, thank you, Mary Jo, for joining us and taking time to share your stories about the infinite banking concept and Nelson Nash, especially. We really appreciate you.